Hello and welcome to News in Depth here on TVP World. I'm your host, Marie Cato. So welcome, and here on TVP World, this is where we get to look into the details of the main stories of the day. Poland's Foreign Minister, Radosław Sikorski, is on a working visit in Lviv, Ukraine. And as ever, it is an expression of Poland's unwavering support, especially during this escalation of Russian aggression. So to get an overview of the current situation on today's developments, I am joined by Randy Potts, who has been covering these recent events. Hello, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So how about we start with Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski's statement during his working visit today. It was something that happened just recently within the last few hours.
Right, so we have a soundbite of that, of the attacks that we can play for the viewers.
Okay, let's start with that then.
Chciałbym złożyć kondolencje jeszcze raz.
I would like to once again express my condolences in connection with the barbaric attack on Lviv and the Lviv region in recent days. We know that last night in Kyiv was also terrible. Poland is already hosting consultations discussing how best to support Ukraine. This includes generators, additional power supplies, expedited construction of power interconnectors between Ukraine and Poland, and of course our LNG terminal in Świnoujście is at your disposal.
So give us some of your thoughts of Radosław Sikorski's remarks.
So I think it's really important that Sikorski went to Ukraine today. It's very easy for Ukraine to feel that they are not getting the support that they need. They need a lot of support. The attacks are increasing. They're getting worse in Kyiv. And so for Sikorski to actually come to Ukraine and specifically mention specific attacks and say we will support with specific kinds of support is really a helpful thing, and I think helps Ukrainian civilians, helps the Ukrainian army morale, helps Zelensky, of course, as well.
It's very important that you mention that. Obviously, every sort of expression, every gesture of that sort is very important. Obviously, that sort of physical presence is always noted, but at the end of the day, these are words, and we have, when I say we, I obviously mean Poland has always expressed a lot of support. It's always been at the lead in that sense. But at the end of the day, we're looking at a very clear escalation of aggression from Russia. And what are we going to see as a next step in terms of Europe and Russia? Because at the end of the day, we seemed as there was a ceasefire. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, it seems as though we've made two, if not many more steps back.
Absolutely. So it's very hard to tell what the next steps would be. We have the increasing attacks in Ukraine, but we also have what appear to be increasing Russian drone attacks, hybrid war attacks all throughout Europe. And the response from Europe and from NATO has been somewhat muted. Several countries have said we will shoot down the drones from now on, but they don't say how or that decision will be made. They're talking about something like a drone wall, but nobody really knows exactly what that would look like. So we really don't know exactly what form that support might take. We feel pretty confident that Poland wants to support Ukraine more, but how it will do that within the structure of the EU and of NATO, it's hard to predict, honestly.
And would you say that perhaps there is a sense that each country that has been affected by these drone incursions in recent weeks and days is a little bit more focused on their domestic concerns in terms of potential Russian attacks, more so than directly helping Ukraine?
I think that's a good way to put it. I think
perhaps a little preoccupied, shall we say?
Absolutely, because I think, in 2022, for instance, you saw Ukrainian flags over in people's windows all through Europe, and you don't see those flags as much anymore. And I don't think it's because there has been more anti-Ukrainian sentiment so much, but as you say, governments are focusing more on what the hybrid attacks mean for them, and there's more of a concern now that Russia might expand its invasion in some way. Some people mention the Baltics, nobody really knows. But like you say, there's less talk of what are we doing for Ukraine and more talk right now of what are we doing for our own...
For us.
Yes, exactly.
For us. For us as NATO, for us as the EU.
Absolutely, right.
Last night's bombings on Zaporizhia are one of the many recent examples of Russia's escalation in terms of the aggression that we see from Ukraine. Would you say that we are back to square one in terms of managing our expectations of, or perhaps, managing expectations, but also managing Russia's aggression?
I think we are, honestly, because we have tried, different things like sanctions. We have tried to, say, cripple the Russian economy. And a lot of the attempts we have made have helped, but at the same time, as you said, the attacks are still increasing. And so what we have done has not had the results we were hoping for. And I think we are at square one in the sense of there doesn't seem to be a clear plan from the EU or NATO of exactly what we are doing to step up our response to these stepped up attacks.
Indeed. We hear that these recent Russian escalations are meant to wear the Ukrainians out even before the harsh winter kicks in. And we know that winter is a very difficult time for Ukraine. It's also difficult for Europe, for the West, in terms of providing support for Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. Well, so we actually do have a soundbite from a Ukrainian pensioner named Ludmila, if we can play that.
Nobody is panicking. We're used to it. We had electricity recently, now we don't. We'll see how it goes.
So a big part of this invasion, after the initial few months when Russia still was hoping it could take Kiev, etc., it has sort of given up on that. The front, if it advances at all, advances very slowly. And so the thrust has been on limiting Ukrainian civilian morale. And there have been attacks on civilians, on churches, hospitals, houses, etc. And the thrust seems to be that Russia thinks that if they continue to hurt civilians, that civilians will give up and say, we surrender. And that soundbite is just a very good example of the average Ukrainian who says, yes, this is awful, we hate everything that's happening, but we're learning to deal with it and we're going to continue to resist.
Some sort of resistance, built-up resistance.
Exactly. The civilian morale, even though you could imagine it being like plummeting with all these attacks, seems to be, for whatever reason, staying pretty steady.
Absolutely. I just want to go back to Radosław Sikorski's visit today, working visit in Lviv today. The Polish press described it as somewhat of a surprise visit. Obviously, it's an expression of support. Do you think that this might signal that there are some developments in terms of collaboration, support, military support that might be in the pipeline?
So it's hard to say. First of all, I want to play a soundbite we have from that meeting of Sikorski about the sanctions.
As for sanctions, you know as well as I do that the European Union is not a state, but a confederation of states. And in order to adopt sanctions, unanimity is required. That unanimity is sometimes difficult to achieve. We have adopted 18 packages of sanctions, and we are now debating the 19th. It's not easy, just as, unfortunately, during the Polish presidency, it was not possible due to the requirement of unanimity to open a negotiation cluster with Ukraine. In the same way, unity is required to release funds from the European Peace Facility. And you know as well as I do which country is blocking that unanimity.
So there's a lot to unpack here. One thing to remember is that Poland cannot unilaterally impose higher sanctions. And so when Sikorski is talking about sanctions, he is specifically talking basically to his partners in the EU and saying, we are willing, Poland is going to Lviv, we want to raise the sanctions, we want to raise the costs for Russia's invasion. Are we going to do that collectively? And so this is, I think, a way to push the EU and to say, look what Poland is doing, look how loudly we're supporting. Can we get stronger sanctions? Can we get that approved? Another interesting thing about it, it's that he talks about there's someone who's blocking that, and that, of course, is Hungary in many different ways. Hungary has been a naysayer saying, no, we don't want to help Ukraine. Lately, Orban has made many inflammatory statements saying that he wants to help Ukraine less. So Sikorski is trying to rally the troops, so to speak, in the EU and also sort of finger wag and say, we have this one partner who's not being a partner, and are we going to figure out what to do about that?
Do you think that Hungary would stand against supporting Ukraine if it didn't have a good reason?
So it's very difficult to tell exactly what Orban or Hungary's motivations are here. Orban gives lots of reasons. He says very clearly he doesn't think that Ukraine should be in the EU. He says that it's not really even a moral issue, that whether or not to support Ukraine. So it's hard to tell exactly what the reason is. We can make guesses, but at the end of the day, we just don't know why Hungary is such an outlier.
Do you think that there will be a way to get around the Hungarian veto in the sense that that Ukraine will essentially get its way and progress into getting into the EU without Hungarian support?
So I think that's being looked into. They're talking about different things related to the energy reserves and the supplies that Hungary buys from Russia. I think it's safe to say, even with Donald Trump recently specifically calling Orban, I think there are more efforts right now than there ever have been to get Hungary on board in some way. And so, there are a lot of things Hungary needs. Its economy is not doing very well. And so there may be some kind of carrot that they're trying to hold out. But as yet, we don't know what that would be.
And on the issue of the sanctions packages, we're looking at the 19th package. So 19 packages, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
Do you really think that this has been an effective way of impacting Russia?
So long term, it has definitely been effective in limiting the Russian economy. We are seeing a lot of creaks and cracks in the Russian economy right now. How much of that we can specifically pinpoint to sanctions it's hard to say exactly, but it does appear that we have limited the Russian economy and thus the Russian war machine. But as you say, this is the 19th package, and there's not one single package of sanctions that has really made a huge effect. And so you do start to wonder, are we going to be at the 39th package someday, the 59th? And if so, then can we make the 20th the biggest ever? What do we need to change? Because what our approach right now clearly isn't doing enough to stop the invasion.
They're discussing limiting, obviously, the movement of Russian diplomats at the moment, sort of as a top-up to that 19th package. Do you think that that will actually impact the Kremlin in any way?
So it's hard to say, but I'm not so hopeful. The Kremlin does not seem very intent on fostering good relations with Europe. It's been very much focused on India, China, North Korea. And so if it's focused on those partnerships, does it really care about diplomatic problems with Europe? Maybe, but there's not a lot of evidence for that.
Just going back to Sikorski's visit in Lviv, he delivered a lecture at Lviv National University, and he said that Russia's plan for Ukraine will not succeed, but Putin refuses to admit his mistake. What does that mean?
So first of all, I think Sikorski is saying, first of all, that it won't succeed in the sense that he's saying the EU and NATO won't allow Putin to, say, take Kiev, to actually achieve his war aims. But the second part is, he's...
Is this a philosophical statement, or if we look at it from the practical point of view, how long will it take before we can actually see that, indeed, Putin is wrong?
Right. I think
or is this a philosophical
Most
statement?
experts seem to agree that the invasion was a mistake in the sense that he didn't achieve his goals. He did think that they were going to be achievable much, really quickly, etc. So it does seem like it was definitely a mistake, and Putin has not ever said, "Oh no, we shouldn't have done this." But I think that looks like a little bit of a psychological war where Sikorski is trying to sort of poke at Putin and say, look, you're losing here. And again, the psychology is a big part of the hybrid war. It's a big part of morale. And I think that is probably what Sikorski is trying to do here.
And in terms of the bigger picture, we have the winter coming. How well is the EU, the broader West, actually equipped to help Ukraine, especially when we're looking at power outages, the infrastructure attacks? It looks like we're looking at a period of escalations.
Right. So that's a difficult thing. One reassuring thing is that Russia has done this for several autumns in a row now. It attacks energy infrastructure, hoping that morale will go down because of winter fuel shortages. And Europe doesn't have a way to specifically dramatically help energy shortages in Ukraine. What it can do is offer money, monetary support, to beef up the defenses of that energy infrastructure. There has been also more natural gas that's been made available to Ukraine. So I think the way to support Ukraine for these kind of infrastructure attacks is mostly money, and a lot more than we've seen.
We often discuss the Russian economic struggles, and it is true, the Russian economy is struggling. The Ukrainian economy is also struggling, and the figures aren't great. But I recall a conversation between Andriy Sybiha and Radosław Sikorski, and he mentioned that each day of the war costs Russia $200 million. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
And while we think that the Russians are struggling, they also gain experience with every single day of the war. So that is something that we often forget. You know, the Ukrainians tell the Poles that we can gain experience from them because they are experienced, but equally the Russians are gaining experience with every single day. So the faster the war ends, the better, obviously. But until Russia has the support of India, of China, they still have the upper hand at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think they probably do. For instance, just in the last month or so, we've documented that the Russian missile assaults into Ukraine are getting more effective than
they go higher as well.
Exactly, and so they are learning from their mistakes, and that's a very worrying thing. It should worry NATO that if Russia's getting better at these kinds of attacks, those attacks can hit anywhere. So, but whether it has the upper hand is very difficult to say because there's a lot of talk right now that maybe NATO is waking up, that at least these talks of the drone wall might actually come to something, and that the more the hybrid war really hits home in deeper in Europe, there might be more resolve to finally do what needs to be done to end this war.
Okay, so I think we're going to end our conversation right there. Thank you so much for joining us here in the studio. Randy Potts, TVP World reporter. You've been covering this Ukrainian story in great detail. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And this concludes News in Depth today at the end of the week. Friday it is. I hope you have a great weekend and make sure you join us next week as well. I was your host, Marie Caso. Join us for more good stuff on TVP World. Goodbye.